The old red barn creaked against the Montana wind, its weathered wood telling stories of decades past. Sam Mitchell pulled his jacket tighter as he approached the double doors, his boots squelching in the mud from last night's drizzle. At 45, he'd done this same morning routine for over 15 years, but today something felt different. The air carried an unusual stillness, broken only by the distant lowing of cattle and the soft patter of droplets falling from the barn's rusted gutters. As Sam reached for the heavy wooden door, a sound stopped him cold. It was faint at first, almost lost in the symphony of morning ranch noises, but unmistakable once he truly listened. Crying, not the bleating of goats or the distressed call of cattle, but something entirely different. Something that made his heart skip in a way he hadn't felt in 2 long years. The crying was coming from inside his barn, and it sounded distinctly, impossibly human. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The heavy barn door protested with a groan as Sam pushed it open, his calloused hands trembling slightly. The familiar smell of hay and leather greeted him, mixed with something else he couldn't quite place. The crying grew louder, more urgent, echoing off the wooden beams and concrete floor. Sam's border collie, Rex, had followed him from the house and now whined softly, pressing against his owner's leg, as if sensing something extraordinary was about to unfold. Sam's eyes adjusted to the dim interior, scanning the familiar landscape of hay bales, farm equipment, and horse stalls. The sound was coming from the far corner, near the old feed storage area where he kept supplies for the cattle. His heart pounded as he made his way across the barn floor, each step deliberate and careful. In all his years of ranching, he'd found plenty of unexpected things in his barn, from stray cats to injured wildlife, but nothing had ever prepared him for what he was about to discover. There, nestled between 2 bales of Timothy hay, was a sight that would change everything. A pink blanket, hand-stitched with tiny flowers, wrapped around what could only be a baby. The infant's face was red from crying, tiny fists flailing in the cool morning air. Beside the makeshift bed sat a small diaper bag and what appeared to be a folded piece of paper, weighted down by a smooth river stone. Sam's knees nearly buckled. He stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. A baby. In his barn, alone, the crying continued, growing more desperate with each passing second, and something deep within Sam's chest awakened. Some long-dormant instinct that he and his late wife Maria had never been able to fulfill. Moving slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal, Sam knelt beside the tiny bundle. His hands, so accustomed to handling cattle and machinery, suddenly felt enormous and clumsy. The baby couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 months old, with wisps of dark hair peeking out from beneath a small knit cap. Her cries echoed off the barn walls, a sound both heartbreaking and somehow beautiful in its pure, desperate honesty. With trembling fingers, Sam reached for the note. The paper was slightly damp from the morning air, and the handwriting was shaky, as if written in haste or distress. The words, when he finally managed to focus on them, hit him like a physical blow. "Her name is Emma. Please take care of her. I can't." That was it. No explanation, no contact information, no signature. Just a plea from someone who had reached the end of their rope, placing their most precious possession in the hands of a stranger. Sam read the note 3 times before setting it aside, his attention returning to the crying infant. Emma. Her name was Emma, and she was his responsibility now. The practical part of Sam's mind kicked into overdrive. He needed to get the baby warm, needed to check if she was hurt or sick, needed to call someone. But who? Sheriff Bradley? The hospital? Social services? The weight of the situation settled on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just finding a stray animal or fixing a broken fence. This was a human life, completely dependent on his next decisions. Sam gently lifted Emma from her hay bale bed, supporting her head the way he vaguely remembered seeing on television shows. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that terrified him. Her crying softened slightly at the contact, as if she somehow knew she was no longer alone. The pink blanket smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something that reminded him of the baby powder Maria used to keep in their bathroom, back when they still held hope for children of their own. The diaper bag yielded a few precious clues about Emma's recent care. There were enough diapers for maybe 3 days, along with several bottles and containers of formula. Someone had planned this abandonment carefully, ensuring the baby would have at least the basics for a short time. At the bottom of the bag, Sam found a small teddy bear with one missing button eye and a birth certificate that confirmed what the note had said. Emma Rose Morrison, born February 15th, 2024, in Millbrook County. 3 months old, Morrison. The name hit Sam like a sledgehammer to the chest. Jake Morrison had been his best friend since childhood, the brother he'd never had, the best man. At his wedding to Maria, Jake, who had died 5 years ago in a military training accident overseas, leaving behind a young wife named Linda who had struggled with depression and financial hardship ever since. Sam hadn't seen Linda in months, not since the awkward conversation at last year's county fair, where she'd seemed distant and troubled. Could this be Linda's baby? Sam's mind raced through the timeline. Jake had been gone for 5 years, but Linda could have remarried, could have found someone else. But why would she bring the baby here? Why to his barn, specifically? The questions multiplied faster than he could process them, but one thing was becoming crystal clear. Emma needed immediate attention, and his emotional crisis would have to wait. Carrying Emma carefully against his chest, Sam made his way back to the ranch house. The 2-story farmhouse had felt too big and too empty since Maria's death, but now, with this tiny life in his arms, it suddenly felt like it might have purpose. Again, Rex and Daisy, his golden retriever, followed anxiously, their animal instincts clearly detecting the significance of what was happening. The kitchen, where Sam usually grabbed a quick cup of coffee before heading out to check the cattle, became an impromptu nursery. He set Emma down gently on the kitchen table, still wrapped in her pink blanket, while he tried to remember everything he'd ever learned about caring for infants. The truth was, he knew more about delivering calves than caring for human babies. But some instincts seemed universal. Warmth, food, safety, comfort. Emma's crying had quieted to intermittent whimpers, her dark eyes now open and seemingly focused on Sam's face. There was something unsettling about the intelligence in those eyes, as if she understood far more than any 3-month-old should. Sam found himself talking to her in the same gentle tone he used with frightened animals, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "It's okay, little one," he murmured, checking to see if her diaper needed changing. "We're going to figure this out together, all right? Your Uncle Sam's got you now." The words surprised him as soon as they left his mouth. Uncle Sam, was that what he was? He'd been Jake's best friend, had stood by Linda at the funeral, had offered help that she'd politely declined. But if this really was Linda's baby, if circumstances had become so desperate that she'd felt the need to abandon her daughter, then maybe he was the closest thing to family Emma had left. The practical matters demanded immediate attention. Sam managed to change Emma's diaper, though it took 3 attempts and far more baby wipes than seemed necessary. Feeding her proved easier. She took the bottle eagerly, her tiny hands grasping at the sides while she drank. As she ate, Sam found himself studying her features, looking for traces of Jake in the curve of her nose or the set of her eyes. There was definitely something familiar there, something that made his chest tight with grief and possibility all at once. While Emma finished her bottle, Sam called Dr. Sarah Chun at the Millbrook General Hospital. Sarah had been Maria's oncologist during the final months, and she'd become something of a friend in the aftermath of his wife's death. If anyone in town could help him navigate this situation without immediately involving social services, it would be Sarah. Sam? Sarah's voice carried surprise and concern. Is everything all right? It's barely 7 in the morning. Sarah. I need your help. Sam's voice was steadier than he felt. I found a baby in my barn this morning. An infant, maybe 3 months old. She seems healthy, but I need someone to check her over, and I need advice about what to do next. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Sam wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Sarah spoke, her professional composure intact, but with an undercurrent of shock. A baby? Sam, are you certain? Did you call the sheriff? I'm certain, and no, I haven't called anyone else yet. Sarah, I think this might be Linda Morrison's daughter. Jake's Linda. The note with her says her name is Emma Morrison, and the timing fits. I need to understand what's happening before I involve the authorities. Another pause, then Sarah's voice took on the decisive tone Sam remembered from Maria's. Treatment days. Bring her to my clinic in an hour. I'll examine her, and we can talk about the next steps. Sam, you did the right thing calling me first. Don't call anyone else until we've had a chance to assess the situation. After hanging up, Sam looked down at Emma, who had finished her bottle and was now staring at him with those impossibly alert eyes. She seemed content for the moment, warm and fed and safe, but Sam knew this was just the beginning. Someone had trusted him with this child, had specifically chosen his barn, his property, his care. The responsibility was overwhelming, but so was something else he couldn't quite name. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. The drive to Sarah's clinic took 20 minutes through the winding back roads of Millbrook County. Sam had fashioned a makeshift car seat using pillows and Emma's blanket, keeping her secure in the passenger seat where he could watch her during the drive. She slept peacefully, one tiny fist curled near her face, seemingly unbothered by the upheaval in her young life. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot when Sam arrived, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, her expression serious but kind. At 38, she'd been practicing medicine in Millbrook for over a decade, and she had the sort of calm competence that came from dealing with rural emergencies and complicated situations. She'd also been dealing with her own grief. Her husband David had died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving her to raise their practice and their reputation alone. Let me see her, Sarah said softly, peering into the improvised car seat. Emma was awake now, her eyes tracking the movement of Sarah's face. She looks alert and healthy from here. Good color, good muscle tone. Whoever left her has been taking care of her. Inside the clinic, Sarah's examination was thorough but gentle. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emma tolerated the checkup with minimal fussing, even seeming curious about the stethoscope and otoscope. While Sarah worked, Sam told her everything, finding the baby in the barn, the note, the Morrison connection, his suspicions about Linda's involvement. She's in excellent health, Sarah announced when the examination was complete. Well-nourished, up-to-date on her vaccinations, based on the records in her bag, no signs of neglect or abuse. This baby has been loved and cared for. The question is why someone felt they couldn't continue that care. Sam helped redress Emma, his hands becoming more confident with each interaction. If it is Linda, and I'm pretty sure it is, then she's been struggling since Jake died. Financial problems, depression, isolation. Maybe she reached a breaking point and thought Emma would be better off with someone else. Sarah leaned against the examination table, her expression thoughtful. That's a big assumption, Sam, and even if it's true, abandoning a child is illegal. We have protocols to follow, reporting requirements. I can't just pretend this didn't happen. I'm not asking you to. Sam's voice was firm but pleading. I'm asking for time. 24 hours to try to find Linda, to understand what happened. If she's in crisis, involving social services right away might make things worse, not better. And Emma is safe with me. You just said she's healthy and well cared for. Sarah studied Sam's face for a long moment, clearly weighing her professional obligations against her personal understanding of the situation. Finally, she sighed. 24 hours, Sam, but I want you to check in with me every 6 hours. And if anything changes with Emma's health, or if you can't locate Linda by tomorrow morning, I'm calling Child Protective Services myself. Understood? Sam nodded, relief flooding through him. Understood. Thank you, Sarah. This means everything. As they prepared to leave, Sarah handed Sam a bag filled with baby supplies from the clinic's sample closet. Formula, diapers, baby, Tylenol, thermometer, and a handful of informational pamphlets about infant care. In case you need these, she said. And Sam, you're going to do fine. I've seen you with injured animals, with Maria during her illness. You have good instincts for caregiving. The drive home was quiet, Emma sleeping peacefully in her makeshift car seat. Sam's mind was already working through his plan. He needed to find Linda Morrison, needed to understand what had driven her to such desperate measures. The old Morrison farm was about 15 miles east of his property, but he had no idea if Linda was even still living there. Jake's military benefits and life insurance had been modest, and the farm itself had been struggling even before his death. Back at the ranch, Sam settled Emma in the living room, using couch cushions to create a safe space where she could lie comfortably while he made phone calls. His first call was to Helen Tucker, the elderly woman who seemed to know everything that happened in Millbrook County. If anyone would know Linda's current situation, it would be Helen. Helen, it's Sam Mitchell. I need to ask you about Linda Morrison. Have you seen her lately? Do you know if she's still living out at the old farm? Helen's voice carried the weight of someone who had been expecting this call for a long time. Oh, Sam, honey. I was wondering when someone would ask about that poor girl. I haven't seen her in weeks, and there's been talk around town. Financial troubles, behind on her property taxes, that sort of thing. Some folks say she's been working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, but it hasn't been enough. Sam's heart sank. Do you know anything about a baby? Did Linda have a child? The pause that followed told Sam everything he needed to know. There were rumors, Helen said carefully. Nothing confirmed, you understand. But Mary at the grocery store mentioned seeing Linda buying baby formula a few months back, and Dr. Chun made some house calls out that way around the time a baby might have been born. But Linda, she kept to herself. Didn't socialize, didn't ask for help when she probably should have. After hanging up with Helen, Sam sat on the couch next to Emma, who was awake and watching him with those intense dark eyes. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of a young woman overwhelmed by circumstances beyond her control. Linda Morrison, widowed at 26, struggling to maintain a failing farm while dealing with her own grief and depression. Finding herself pregnant and alone, possibly unable to afford proper prenatal care, giving birth to a daughter she loved but couldn't support. The image of Linda making the heartbreaking decision to bring Emma to his barn, to leave her daughter with someone she trusted to care for her, made Sam's chest ache with empathy and sorrow. Jake would have been devastated to know his wife had reached such a desperate point, would have moved heaven and earth to help her if he'd been alive. But Jake wasn't alive, and Linda had been facing her struggles alone. The question now was whether Sam could find her before she did something irreversible, before her desperation led to an even more tragic outcome. He looked down at Emma, this tiny life that had been entrusted to his care, and felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a familiar yoke. Your mama's in trouble, isn't she, little one? He said softly, reaching out to touch Emma's tiny hand. Her fingers immediately curled around his index finger, gripping with surprising strength. "But we're going to find her, and we're going to help her. That's what family does, and whether she knows it or not, you and your mama are family." The afternoon stretched ahead with a dozen tasks and 1,000 questions. Sam needed to drive out to the Morrison farm, needed to check with local businesses where Linda might have been working, needed to piece together the timeline that had led to this moment. But first, he needed to make sure Emma was secure and comfortable, needed to transform his bachelor ranch house into a temporary nursery. As he carried Emma upstairs to what had once been the spare bedroom he and Maria had hopefully painted yellow for the child they'd never had, Sam felt something shifting inside him. For 2 years, this house had been a monument to grief and lost dreams, but now with Emma's soft breathing and tiny presence filling the empty spaces, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like the beginning of a story that might still have a happy ending, if he was brave enough to write it. The Morrison farm looked like a place where hope had come to die. Sam's truck crunched over the gravel driveway that was more weeds, then stone, past a mailbox that hung at an odd angle with peeling paint spelling out names that no longer lived there. The farmhouse itself, once painted a cheerful yellow, had faded to the color of old butter, its shutters hanging crooked and several windows covered with cardboard and duct tape. Emma rode quietly in her makeshift car seat, having adapted to Sam's presence with a remarkable resilience that seemed unique to very young children. She watched the passing landscape with curious eyes, occasionally making soft cooing sounds that tugged at something deep in Sam's chest. He'd left Rex and Daisy at home, sensing that this visit required a delicate approach. The front porch sagged under the weight of accumulated neglect, and Sam noticed that several boards had rotted through completely. Paint chips littered the wooden steps like fallen leaves, and a rocking chair sat motionless in the corner, its seat split and weathered. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant sound of wind through the cottonwood trees that Jake had planted as saplings 15 years ago. Sam knocked on the door, the sound echoing hollowly through what felt like an empty house. No answer came, though he waited a full minute before trying again. The windows were dark, curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. A stack of unopened mail protruded from the slot beside the door, and Sam could see past due notices mixed in with the usual collection of advertisements and bills. Walking around to the back of the house, Sam peered through a gap in the kitchen curtains. The room beyond was neat but sparse, with empty counters and an open refrigerator that appeared to contain little more than condiments and a few takeout containers. A single plate and cup sat in the dish drainer, suggesting that someone had been living here recently, but perhaps not anymore. The barn behind the house told a different story. Jake had built it himself, and even 5 years after his death, it remained in good condition. The doors stood slightly ajar, and Sam could hear movement inside. His heart rate quickened as he approached, Emma stirring in his arms as if sensing his tension. Inside the barn, he found Linda Morrison. She was thinner than he remembered, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing faded jeans and a flannel shirt that had seen better days. She stood at a workbench, methodically packing tools into cardboard boxes with the focused intensity of someone trying not to think about what they were doing. When she heard Sam's footsteps, she turned, and he saw immediately that she'd been crying. Recognition flickered across her face, followed quickly by something that looked like resignation mixed with terror. Her eyes went immediately to the baby, in Sam's arms, and her whole body seemed to crumple slightly, as if the sight of Emma safe and cared for was both relief and devastation combined. "I wondered how long it would take," Linda said quietly, her voice rough with exhaustion. "I hoped maybe you wouldn't figure it out, that you'd just think she was some random baby that needed help." Sam shifted Emma to one arm, keeping his voice gentle. "Linda, what happened? Why didn't you come to me directly if you needed help?" Linda laughed, but there was no humor in it. Come to you and say what, Sam? That I can't take care of my own daughter? That I'm such a failure as a mother that I can't even afford to keep the lights on, let alone buy formula and diapers? She gestured around the barn, at the boxes and the obvious preparations for departure. That I've lost everything Jake worked for and I'm about to lose the farm too? The pain in her voice was raw and immediate, the kind of anguish that came from someone who had fought as hard as they could and still found themselves losing. Sam took a step closer, noting the dark circles under Linda's eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she continued packing. You're not a failure, Sam said firmly. You're a woman who's been dealing with an impossible situation on her own. But Linda, abandoning Emma isn't the answer. There are other options, people who want to help. Linda's hands stilled on the box she was packing. Help, she repeated bitterly. You mean charity? You mean admitting that I can't handle my own life, that I need everyone in Millbrook County to know what a mess I've become? I mean support, Sam corrected. I mean family. Jake was my brother in every way that mattered, which makes you, and Emma, family too. You should have come to me months ago. The silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of Emma's soft breathing and the distant mooing of cattle from Sam's ranch. Linda stared at her daughter, and Sam could see the longing in her expression, the desperate love of a mother who believed she was doing the right thing by walking away. I can't even afford to feed her properly anymore, Linda whispered. The farm's been bleeding money since Jake died, and I've been working double shifts at the diner and cleaning offices at night just to keep us afloat. But it's not enough. The bank is foreclosing next month, and I don't have anywhere else to go. Sam felt his heart break for this young woman who had been carrying such a burden alone. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you ask for help before it got this bad? Linda's laugh was hollow. Ask who? Jake's family disowned me after the funeral, said I was too expensive to keep around. My own parents died when I was 20, and I don't have any siblings. The people in town, they're nice enough, but they have their own problems. I couldn't just show up and announce that I was pregnant and broke. You were pregnant? Sam asked gently, pieces of the timeline falling into place. Linda nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Found out about a month after Jake's accident. Some kind of cosmic joke, you know. Finally pregnant after trying for 2 years, but he's not here to see it. She looked at Emma with such tender sadness that Sam had to look away. I thought maybe having her would make me feel closer to him, but it just made everything harder. Sam shifted Emma to his other arm, the baby content to watch this conversation with those remarkably alert eyes. Linda, listen to me. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Come back to the ranch with me. Both of you. We'll figure out the rest together. The offer hung in the air between them, and Sam could see Linda wrestling with it. Pride and desperation warred across her face. The desire to accept help battling against the fear of being seen as weak or incapable. I can't be a burden to you too, Linda said finally. You've got your own life, your own problems. You lost Maria, and you're still dealing with that. The last thing you need is someone else's mess complicating your world. My world has been empty for 2 years, Sam said quietly. Maria and I, we tried for children for 10 years. We went through every treatment, every possibility, and it never happened. This morning, when I found Emma in my barn, it felt like maybe there was still a purpose for all that empty space we'd prepared. Linda stared at him, surprise replacing some of the resignation in her expression. You want to help raise her? I want to help both of you, Sam said firmly. Jake would never forgive me if I let his wife and daughter struggle when I had the means to help. And honestly, Linda, taking care of Emma today has been the first time in 2 years that I felt like I had a reason to get up in the morning. The silence that followed was different, charged with possibility rather than despair. Linda looked at Emma, then at Sam, then back at the boxes she'd been packing. Finally, she sank down onto a hay bale, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "I wanted to be a good mother," she whispered. "I wanted to give her everything she deserved. But I've been so scared, Sam, so tired and scared and alone. When I brought her to your barn this morning, I thought I was giving her a chance at a better life. I thought maybe you'd find a nice family to adopt her, people who could give her things I can't." Sam sat down on the hay bale beside her, careful not to jostle Emma. "Linda, what Emma needs most isn't money or a perfect house. She needs love, stability, and people who care about her well-being. You've been giving her love her whole life. The stability and support, that's something we can build together." Linda looked at him through tear-filled eyes. "You really mean that? You'd want us both around?" "I mean it," Sam said without hesitation. "The ranch house has 4 bedrooms, and I've been rattling around in it like a marble in a shoebox. There's plenty of space, plenty of work if you want. And Emma would have room to grow up with fresh air and open spaces." For the first time since Sam had arrived, Linda smiled. It was tentative and fragile, but genuine. "Jake used to talk about your ranch, about how peaceful it was. He said it was the kind of place where a person could really breathe." "He was right," Sam agreed. "And it's been too quiet lately. Could use some life in it again." Linda reached out tentatively toward Emma, who immediately turned her head toward her mother's voice. The baby's face lit up in what could only be described as joy, her tiny arms reaching toward Linda with unmistakable recognition and love. "Hi, sweetheart," Linda whispered, taking Emma into her arms for the first time since that morning. "Mama's sorry. Mama's so sorry for leaving you, even for a little while." Emma settled immediately against her mother's chest, making contented sounds that spoke of relief and security. Watching them together, Sam felt something unlock in his chest, a tightness he'd been carrying since Maria's death finally beginning to ease. "We should probably head back to my place," Sam said after a few minutes. "Dr. Chun wants to check on Emma again this evening, and I promise to call her every 6 hours until we get this sorted out." Linda looked up sharply. "Dr. Chun knows about Emma being abandoned?" "She knows I found a baby and that I suspected you were involved," Sam said carefully. "But she agreed to give us 24 hours to figure things out before involving social services. She's on our side, Linda. She wants what's best for Emma, too." The drive back to Sam's ranch was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Linda sat in the passenger seat with Emma on her lap, pointing out landmarks and talking softly to her daughter about the countryside they were passing through. Sam found himself stealing glances at them, this makeshift family unit that had formed so unexpectedly in his truck. The ranch house seemed to welcome them with open arms. Rex and Daisy met them at the front door, tails wagging with enthusiasm that suggested they approved of the new arrivals. Linda looked around the large, comfortable rooms with appreciation, taking in the solid furniture and warm colors that Maria had chosen years ago. "It's beautiful," Linda said sincerely. Jake wasn't exaggerating when he said you and Maria had made a real home here. Sam felt the familiar pang at Maria's name, but it was softer now, tinged with something that felt almost like gratitude. "She had good taste," he agreed. "Always said this house was meant for a family, even when it was just the 2 of us." That evening, they worked together to transform the spare bedroom into a proper nursery. Linda had brought Emma's belongings from the farm, including a crib that Jake had built during the pregnancy and a rocking chair that had belonged to Linda's mother. As they arranged furniture and hung the mobile that Jake had carved from wood, Sam felt a sense of rightness settling over the house. Dr. Chun arrived just as they were finishing Emma's room. She examined the baby thoroughly, pronouncing her healthy and well-adjusted despite the day's upheavals. When she finished, she sat down with Sam and Linda in the kitchen, her expression serious but kind. "Legally, I should report this to Child Protective Services," Sarah said directly. "Abandonment is a serious matter. and there are protocols in place for a reason. Linda tensed, her arms tightening around Emma, but Sarah held up a hand. However, I can see that this was a temporary crisis situation that has been resolved within the family unit. Emma is clearly safe, loved, and well cared for. As far as my medical records are concerned, Emma has been living here with her mother and family friends since birth. The relief in the room was palpable. Linda's eyes filled with tears again, but these were tears of gratitude rather than despair. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving us a chance." Sarah smiled, the first truly relaxed expression Sam had seen from her all day. "Just make sure Emma continues to get regular checkups, and call me if you have any concerns. And, Linda, if you're interested, we could always use help at the clinic. I know you have experience with bookkeeping from managing the farm." As Sarah prepared to leave, she pulled Sam aside. "You're doing a good thing here," she said quietly. "But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Grief can make us make decisions that feel right in the moment, but become complicated later." Sam considered her words carefully. "I've been thinking about that all day," he admitted. "But Sarah, when I found Emma this morning, for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had a purpose again. And seeing Linda trying so hard to take care of her daughter alone, when I have more than enough space and resources to help, it just feels like the right thing to do." Sarah nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. "Just take it one day at a time. And Sam? That little girl is lucky to have found her way to you." After Sarah left, Sam and Linda sat in the living room while Emma slept peacefully in her new nursery. The house felt different than it had that morning, filled with a warmth and energy that had been missing for far too long. "I still can't quite believe this is real," Linda said softly. "This morning I thought I was giving up my daughter forever, and tonight we're sitting in a beautiful home talking about the future." Sam looked around the room, seeing it through Linda's eyes. "This morning I thought I was going to spend another day going through the motions of living. Tonight I'm thinking about converting the old bunkhouse into a workshop, maybe teaching Emma to ride when she's older." Linda smiled, and Sam realized it was the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her. Jake would love knowing she'd grow up around horses and cattle. He always said ranching was the most honest work a person could do. The mention of Jake brought a comfortable silence rather than the awkward pause Sam had expected. His best friend's presence seemed to hover over the conversation, not as a ghost but as a blessing, as if Jake himself had orchestrated this unlikely family formation. "I miss him," Linda said quietly, "every day. But for the first time since he died, I feel like maybe I can build something good on the foundation we started together." Sam nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "He'd be proud of you, Linda, for fighting as hard as you did, for making the difficult choices you thought were best for Emma, and he'd be relieved knowing you don't have to fight alone anymore." As the evening wore on, they talked about practical matters. Linda would move her remaining belongings from the farm, and Sam would help her navigate the foreclosure process. There might be some personal items worth saving, and perhaps they could work out a plan to satisfy some of the debt. Linda could help with the ranch bookkeeping and take care of Emma while Sam handled the livestock and maintenance. But mostly, they talked about Emma, about her personality, which seemed remarkably calm and observant for such a young baby, about her future, the opportunities a ranch childhood would provide, about the ways they could honor Jake's memory by raising his daughter with the values he'd held dear. When Linda finally went upstairs to check on Emma before bed, Sam remained in the living room, staring into the dying embers of the fire he'd built earlier. The house creaked and settled around him, but it no longer felt empty. For the first time since Maria's death, he felt like he was living in a home rather than just occupying a space. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They'd need to register Emma with a pediatrician, help Linda find steady work, navigate the complex emotions of their unusual living arrangement. But tonight, Sam felt something he'd almost forgotten how to feel: optimism. The sound of Emma's soft crying drifted down from upstairs, followed by Linda's gentle voice singing a lullaby Sam didn't recognize. The melody was sweet and soothing, and Sam found himself relaxing into his chair, surrounded by the simple contentment of a house where a family lived. He thought about Jake, about the conversations they'd had during their friendship, about the kind of fathers they hoped to be someday. Jake hadn't lived to meet his daughter, but somehow his presence felt strong in this house tonight, in the love between Linda and Emma, in the unexpected second chance they'd all been given. As the singing upstairs faded to silence, and the house settled into peaceful quiet, Sam made a silent promise to his old friend. Emma would know about her father, would grow up hearing stories about Jake's courage and kindness. She'd learn to ride and rope and take care of animals. She'd know the satisfaction of honest work and the security of unconditional love. And maybe, just maybe, this broken family could heal each other in ways that none of them had dared to hope. For that morning, the first week at the ranch passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Sam woke each morning to sounds he hadn't heard in years: the soft murmur of Linda's voice as she fed Emma, the gentle creaking of the rocking chair Jake had built, the musical laughter that seemed to bubble up from Linda at unexpected moments. The house felt alive again, filled with purpose and gentle chaos that transformed every corner. Emma proved to be an extraordinarily adaptable baby, seeming to thrive in her new environment. She watched everything with those intelligent dark eyes, tracking the movement of the ceiling fan in the living room, following Rex as he padded through the house, reaching tiny fingers toward the sunbeams that streamed through the kitchen windows each morning. Her schedule began to sync with the rhythm of ranch life, waking early when Sam headed out to feed the cattle, napping during the heat of midday, alert and playful in the cool evening hours. Linda threw herself into ranch life with an enthusiasm that surprised Sam. She'd grown up on a small farm before marrying Jake, and she remembered more about livestock care than she'd initially realized. By the third day, she was helping Sam check the cattle, carrying Emma in a baby sling that allowed her to work while keeping her daughter close. Her knowledge of bookkeeping proved invaluable as she began organizing Sam's financial records, which had fallen into chaos during his period of grief-induced neglect. The transformation in Linda herself was remarkable to witness. The hollow-eyed, desperate woman Sam had found in the Morrison barn was being replaced by someone who moved with growing confidence and purpose. Color was returning to her cheeks. Her smile came more easily, and she began talking about plans for the future rather than just surviving day to day. But it was the small moments that truly revealed how naturally they were becoming a family. The morning Sam found Linda asleep, in the rocking chair with Emma against her chest, both of them bathed in early sunlight. The evening Linda wordlessly handed him a cup of coffee exactly the way he liked it, black with just a touch of honey. The way Emma's face lit up when she saw Sam enter a room, her tiny arms reaching toward him with the same enthusiasm she showed. Her mother, Mrs. Helen Tucker, arrived unannounced on Thursday morning, carrying a casserole dish and wearing the expression of someone on a mission. Sam had been expecting this visit since the day Linda moved in. Millbrook County was small enough that news traveled fast, and Helen Tucker was the unofficial keeper of community information and moral standards. "Sam Mitchell," Helen announced as she climbed the porch steps with surprising agility for her. 78 years. I came to see this baby everyone's talking about and to meet Linda Morrison properly. Linda emerged from the kitchen with Emma on her hip, her hair pulled back in a ponytail and wearing one of Sam's old work shirts over her jeans. She looked nervous but determined, and Sam felt a surge of protective pride watching her straighten her shoulders to meet Helen's scrutiny. "Mrs. Tucker," Linda said politely, "it's nice to see you again. Would you like some coffee?" Helen studied Linda with the sharp eyes of someone who had raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. Her gaze took in Linda's appearance, the baby's. obvious health and contentment, and the easy familiarity between Linda and Sam as they moved around each other in the kitchen. "I'll take that coffee," Helen said finally, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. "And I'd like to hear the story of how you all ended up here together." Sam and Linda exchanged a look, having anticipated this moment. They'd agreed to be honest about the basic facts while keeping the more painful details private. Linda took the lead, her voice steady as she explained about the financial difficulties after Jake's death, her struggle to maintain the farm while caring for a newborn, and Sam's offer of help when the situation became desperate. Helen listened without interrupting, her weathered hands wrapped around her coffee cup. When Linda finished, the older woman was quiet for a long moment, studying Emma, who was content to play with a wooden spoon from Linda's pocket. "Jake Morrison was a good man," Helen said finally. "Died too young, left too much unfinished. But he'd be glad knowing his girls are being looked after properly." She looked directly at Sam. "And you, Sam Mitchell, have been wandering around that ranch like a lost soul for 2 years. Maybe it's time you remembered that living means more than just getting through the days." The directness of her words hit Sam unexpectedly. Helen had known him since he was a boy, had attended his wedding to Maria, had brought food during Maria's illness and after her funeral. She was one of the few people who could speak to him with such blunt honesty. "I'm trying to remember that," Sam said quietly. Helen nodded approvingly. "Good. Now, Linda, I want you to know that whatever gossip might be floating around town, most folks are just glad to see this family getting the help they need. Jake's death hit the whole community hard, and we should have done more to support you afterward." Linda's eyes brightened with unshed tears. "Thank you, Mrs. Tucker. That means more than you know. Call me Helen, dear. And if anyone gives you any trouble about your living arrangements here, you send them to me. I've been dealing with small-minded people for 8 decades, and I've gotten quite good at it." After Helen left, Linda stood at the kitchen window watching the older woman's car disappear down the driveway. "I was terrified she was going to disapprove," Linda admitted. "In a town this size, her opinion carries a lot of weight." Sam moved to stand beside her, unconsciously adjusting his position so that Linda and Emma were between him and the window. The gesture felt natural, protective without being possessive. "Helen's tough but fair. She's also the closest thing to a grandmother most kids in this county have. Emma could do worse than having Helen Tucker looking out for her." That afternoon, while Emma napped, Sam and Linda worked together to repair a section of fence that separated the ranch from the county road. The work was companionable and peaceful, requiring just enough concentration to prevent awkward silences while allowing for easy conversation. Linda proved surprisingly skilled with fence repair, her small hands more nimble than Sam's when it came to threading wire through tight spaces. "Jake taught me," she explained when Sam complimented her technique. "Said a rancher's wife needed to know how to fix things, not just how to call for help." They worked in comfortable rhythm, Sam holding posts steady while Linda secured the wire, their movements coordinated like a team that had been working together for years rather than days. The May afternoon was warm, but not oppressive, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of new grass and wildflowers. "Can I ask you something?" Linda said as they moved to the next section of fence. "What was Maria like? I mean, I met her a few times at community events, but I never really knew her." Sam paused in his work, considering the question. People had asked him about Maria in the months after her death, but usually in the hushed, careful tones reserved for discussing the recently departed. Linda's question felt different, more like genuine curiosity than obligatory sympathy. "She was stubborn," Sam said finally, surprising himself with the answer. "Incredibly stubborn and determined. When she decided she wanted something, she'd move heaven and earth to get it. When she decided she wanted me, she basically reorganized my entire life until I figured out I wanted her too." Linda smiled at the warmth in his voice. "How did you meet?" "County fair. 15 years ago. She was running the 4-H livestock judging competition, and I was showing cattle. She caught me trying to sneak my bull an extra ration of grain before the judging, and instead of disqualifying me, she gave me a lecture about fair competition and the importance of integrity in agriculture. Did you win? Came in second, Sam admitted. But I got her phone number, which turned out to be worth more than any blue ribbon. They continued working as Sam shared more memories of Maria, her terrible cooking when they were first married, and how she'd improved to the point where her Sunday dinners became legendary in the county. Her battle with the local zoning board when she wanted to start a small farmers market in town. Her fierce loyalty to the people she loved and her inability to back down from a fight she believed in. She would have loved Emma, Sam said as they finished the last section of fence. Would have spoiled her absolutely rotten and taught her to be as stubborn and determined as she was. Linda was quiet for a moment, coiling the leftover wire with careful precision. Do you think she would have approved of this arrangement? Of me and Emma being here? The question caught Sam off guard with its vulnerability. He studied Linda's face, seeing the genuine concern there, the worry that she might somehow be intruding on sacred ground. I think, Sam said carefully, that Maria always believed homes were meant to be filled with love and laughter. She'd be happy knowing this house is serving that purpose again. That evening, they established what would become a cherished routine. After dinner, they'd sit on the front porch while Emma had her evening bottle, watching the sun set over the pastures where the cattle grazed peacefully. Rex and Daisy would settle at their feet, occasionally lifting their heads to track the movement of rabbits or the flight of hawks overhead. These porch conversations became the foundation of their deepening friendship. Linda shared stories about her marriage to Jake, their dreams for the farm, the devastating grief of losing him so suddenly. She talked about the isolation of early motherhood, the fear that she wasn't doing anything right, the overwhelming love she felt for Emma, mixed with terror that she wasn't enough. Sam found himself opening up in ways he hadn't since Maria's death. He talked about the helplessness of watching cancer consume the woman he loved, the guilt he felt about being relieved when her suffering finally ended, the way grief had hollowed him out until he felt like he was just going through the motions of living. I stopped believing in much of anything after she died, Sam admitted one evening as they watched. Emma tracked the movement of fireflies beginning to blink in the gathering dusk. Stopped believing that good things could happen, that life had any real purpose beyond just getting through it. Linda shifted Emma to her other arm, the baby content to study Sam's face in the fading light. And now? Sam considered the question, looking out over the ranch that had been his refuge and his prison for the past 2 years. Now I'm starting to think maybe purpose finds you when you least expect it. Maybe it doesn't always look the way you thought it would. The second week brought new challenges and deeper connections. Emma caught a minor cold that sent Linda into a panic of worry and Sam into protective overdrive. They took turns walking the floors with her during a restless night, trading off every few hours with the easy coordination of parents who understood that shared responsibility meant shared concern. Dr. Chen assured them that Emma's symptoms were completely normal for a baby her age, but Linda's reaction to her daughter's illness revealed the depth of her fears about motherhood. Sam found her crying quietly in the kitchen at 3 a.m, exhausted and overwhelmed by the weight of keeping another human being safe and healthy. I don't know what I'm doing, Linda whispered, accepting the cup of tea Sam offered. Jake was supposed to be here for this. He was supposed to help me figure out how to be a good parent. Sam sat beside her at the kitchen table, noting how small and vulnerable she looked in the oversized pajamas she'd borrowed from his dresser. Linda, you've been figuring it out just fine on your own for 3 months. Emma is healthy and happy and obviously adores you. The fact that you worry about doing right by her is proof that you already are. But what if I make a mistake? What if I miss something important and she gets really sick? What if I'm not strong enough or smart enough or patient enough? The raw honesty of her fears touched something deep in Sam's chest. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, noting how cold her fingers were despite the warm night. "Then you do what every parent in the history of the world has done," Sam said gently. "You do your best, you learn from your mistakes, and you love her through all of it. And Linda, you're not doing this alone anymore. Whatever challenges come up, we'll face them together." The simple promise seemed to settle something in Linda's posture. She squeezed his hand gratefully, and Sam realized that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, touching her had become natural and comfortable. Not romantic, exactly, but intimate in the way that shared responsibility and mutual care created bonds between people. Emma recovered from her cold within a few days, but the experience had cemented something between Sam and Linda. They moved around each other with increasing ease, their lives beginning to merge in practical and emotional ways. Linda took over the cooking, discovering that Sam had been living primarily on sandwiches and canned soup since Maria's death. Sam taught Linda to drive the ranch ATV so she could help check cattle in the far pastures, with Emma secure in a specially adapted baby seat. The community began to accept their unusual family arrangement with surprising grace. Sheriff Bradley stopped by one afternoon to check on things, spending an hour playing with Emma while discreetly observing the household dynamics. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him, because he left with a smile and an invitation for them to bring Emma to the annual county picnic. Dr. Chun became a regular visitor, ostensibly for Emma's routine checkups, but clearly enjoying the adult conversation and the peaceful atmosphere of the ranch. She and Linda developed an easy friendship based on their shared experience of navigating life in a small town while dealing with personal loss. The most significant change came at the end of the second week, when Linda asked Sam to help her sort through Jake's belongings that she'd brought from the farm. She'd been avoiding the task, but living in Sam's house surrounded by memories of his life with Maria had given her the courage to face her own grief more directly. They spread Jake's things across the living room floor, his military medals, photographs from their courtship and marriage, tools he'd inherited from his father, clothes that still carried the faint scent of his cologne. Linda handled each item with reverent care, sharing stories and memories as they decided what to keep, what to donate, and what to save specifically for Emma. "I want her to know him," Linda said, holding up a photograph of Jake in his military dress uniform. "I want her to know that her father was brave and kind and funny, that he would have been an amazing dad if he'd had the chance." Sam picked up Jake's old guitar, remembering evenings when his friend would play and sing around campfires during their bachelor days. "We'll make sure she knows," Sam promised. "I've got 20 years worth of Jake stories to tell her, and by the time I'm done, she'll feel like she grew up hearing his voice." As they worked, Linda began talking about Jake in a way Sam had never heard before. Not as the perfect husband taken too soon, but as a real man with flaws and dreams and complicated emotions. She talked about his struggles to adjust to civilian life after his military service, his moments of doubt about whether he was good enough for her, his excitement about becoming a father mixed with terror about whether he'd know how to do it right. "He was so scared about the baby," Linda admitted, carefully folding one of Jake's favorite shirts. "Kept saying he didn't know anything about being a father, that his own dad had been distant and critical. I kept telling him that the fact that he was worried about it proved he'd be great at it." The conversation gave Sam new insight into his friend's inner life and helped him understand Linda's own parenting fears. Jake's anxieties about fatherhood had become Linda's anxieties about motherhood, compounded by the grief of facing it alone. "He would be so proud of how you're raising Emma," Sam said with certainty. "And he'd be grateful knowing she's got a safe place to grow up, surrounded by people who love her." That night, after Linda had gone to bed, Sam sat on the porch with Emma sleeping against his chest. The baby had been fussy earlier, and Linda had handed her over with exhausted gratitude when Sam offered to take a turn. Now Emma slept peacefully, her tiny fist curled around Sam's finger, her breathing soft and even against his shirt. The night was clear and cool, with stars visible in a way that was impossible in more populated areas. Sam found himself thinking about the strange turns life could take, about how tragedy and hope could be so closely intertwined that sometimes they were indistinguishable from each other. 3 weeks ago, he'd been a man going through the motions of living, maintaining his ranch and his routines, but feeling fundamentally disconnected from any sense of purpose or joy. Tonight, he sat holding a baby who wasn't his biological daughter, but who had somehow become essential to his happiness, in a house that was beginning to feel like a home again. Emma stirred slightly in her sleep, making the soft sounds that Sam had learned meant she was dreaming. He adjusted his hold on her, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his chest, how natural it felt to be responsible for her safety and comfort. When Linda appeared in the doorway an hour later, having woken to find Emma's crib empty, she paused to watch Sam with her daughter. Something in her expression had changed, become softer and more complex than simple gratitude. "She loves you," Linda said quietly, settling into the chair beside him. "I can see it in the way she looks at you, the way she settles when you hold her." Sam looked down at Emma's peaceful face, feeling his heart constrict with an emotion he was only beginning to understand. "I love her too," he admitted, the words feeling both natural and terrifying. "Both of you, actually. This whole situation, it's become more important to me than I expected." Linda was quiet for a moment, and Sam worried that he'd said too much, revealed feelings that might complicate their carefully balanced living arrangement. But when she spoke, her voice was warm with understanding. "I know," she said simply. "I feel it too. This sense that we're becoming something together, something none of us expected but all of us needed." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars and listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Emma slept peacefully between them, and Sam felt a contentment he'd thought was lost forever settling into his bones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new discoveries, but tonight, this makeshift family felt perfectly, impossibly right. 1 month after finding Emma in his barn, Sam stood in the kitchen at dawn, preparing bottles and coffee with the practiced efficiency of someone whose life had found its rhythm. The early morning routine had become sacred to him, the quiet house, the soft sounds of Emma stirring upstairs, the gradual lightening of the sky over the pastures where his cattle grazed peacefully. These moments belonged to him alone, a brief interlude before the day brought its responsibilities and joys. Linda appeared in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep and wearing the terry cloth robe that had become her uniform for early morning feedings. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate the world quietly, mindful of not waking a sleeping baby. Emma rode contentedly on her hip, wide awake and alert despite the early hour, her dark eyes taking in the familiar sights of the kitchen with obvious pleasure. "Morning, sunshine," Sam said softly to Emma, who immediately reached toward him with grabbing fingers. The baby's face lit up with what could only be described as pure joy, her whole body wiggling with excitement at seeing him. The reaction never failed to touch something deep in Sam's chest, a warmth that spread through him like sunlight breaking through clouds. "She's been asking for you for 10 minutes, Linda said with a smile, transferring Emma to Sam's arms. Kept looking toward the door and making those little sounds she makes when she wants something. Sam settled Emma against his chest, marveling, as always, at how perfectly she fit there, how natural it felt to hold her. In the past month, he'd learned to read her different cries, to distinguish between hunger and tiredness, and the particular fussy sound she made when she needed a diaper change. He'd become expert at the one-handed bottle preparation, at the gentle swaying motion that could calm her when she was overtired, at the silly faces that made her laugh with delighted squeals. "Dr. Chun called yesterday," Linda said, pouring coffee for both of them. She wanted to know if we'd be interested in making our arrangement with Emma official. There are legal steps we could take, guardianship papers that would give you parental rights alongside me. The suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had fully discussed. Sam looked down at Emma, who was studying his face with the intense concentration she brought to everything that interested her. The idea of legal recognition, of officially becoming her father in the eyes of the law, sent a mix of excitement and terror through him. "What do you think about that?" Sam asked carefully, not wanting to pressure Linda, but unable to hide his own interest in the possibility. Linda settled into the chair across from him, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup in a gesture that had become familiar over the past month. "I think," she said slowly, "that Emma already sees you as her father. I think you've been more of a parent to her than most men are to their biological children. And I think Jake would be happy knowing she has someone who loves her the way you do." The words settled into Sam's chest like a warm coal, spreading heat through his entire body. He'd been thinking about this possibility for weeks, but hearing Linda voice it made it real in a way that took his breath away. "I'd like that," Sam said quietly. "I'd like it more than I can probably express. But Linda, I need you to know that this doesn't change anything between us. I'm not trying to replace Jake or take over your role as Emma's mother. I just want to be part of her life officially. To have the right to make decisions about her care if something happens to you." Linda's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief rather than sadness. "Sam, you're not replacing Jake. You're honoring his memory by taking care of the family he left behind. And you're not taking over my role as Emma's mother. You're giving her something I never could have given her on my own, a father who chooses to love her every single day." That afternoon, they drove to the county courthouse together, Emma sleeping peacefully in her car seat between them. The guardianship papers were straightforward, requiring only their signatures and a brief hearing before Judge Matthews, who had known Sam since he was a boy and who seemed pleased by the arrangement. "It's good to see you moving forward, Sam," Judge Matthews said as he signed the final documents. "Maria would be happy knowing you've found a way to build a family again." Walking out of the courthouse, Sam felt fundamentally changed. Not just because of the legal documents in his pocket, but because of what they represented. A commitment to love and protect Emma for the rest of his life. A promise to be the father Jake couldn't be. A declaration that this unusual family they'd created was worth making official. Linda seemed to feel the change, too. She linked her arm through his as they walked to the truck, a gesture that was both celebratory and intimate. "So, Dad," she said with a teasing smile, "how does it feel to be official?" Sam laughed, the sound carrying more joy than he'd felt in years. "Terrifying and wonderful, and exactly right," he admitted. "How does it feel to have a co-parent?" "Like I can finally breathe," Linda said honestly. "Like I don't have to carry all the worry and responsibility alone anymore." That evening, they celebrated with a quiet dinner on the porch while Emma played with the wooden blocks Sam had carved for her. The baby was becoming more interactive every day, reaching for objects with increasing accuracy, making sounds that were beginning to resemble actual words. She had developed distinct preferences and opinions, showing delight when Rex approached, but wariness around strangers, loving the sensation of grass under her fingers, but protesting loudly when her face got wet. "She's going to be stubborn," Linda observed, watching Emma determinedly try to fit a square block into a round hole despite multiple demonstrations of the correct approach. Just like her father. Sam felt the familiar pang at the mention of Jake, but it was softer now, tinged with gratitude rather than pure grief. They'd created a tradition of talking about Jake regularly, sharing stories and memories that would help Emma know her biological father as she grew older. The conversations had become easier over time, less weighted with sadness and more filled with celebration of the man they'd both loved. "Jake was stubborn about the right things," Sam said. adjusting Emma's position so she could reach her blocks more easily. He was stubborn about protecting the people he loved, stubborn about doing what was right even when it was difficult. If Emma inherited that from him, she'd do fine in life. As the sun set over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Sam felt a contentment he'd thought was lost forever. The evening ritual of sitting on the porch with Linda and Emma had become the anchor of his days, the time when he felt most connected to the life they built together. "I need to tell you something," Linda said suddenly, her voice carrying a nervous edge that made Sam look at her more closely. "I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I need to be honest with you about how I'm feeling." Sam felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. Had he overstepped somehow? Had the guardianship papers made Linda uncomfortable? Was she having second thoughts about their living arrangement? "I'm falling in love with you," Linda said quietly, the words rushing out as if she'd been holding them back for a long time. "I know this whole situation is complicated, and I know we both came into it for Emma's sake, but Sam, somewhere along the way, my feelings changed. I needed you to know that, even if it changes things between us." The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge that could either connect them or divide them forever. Sam stared at Linda, seeing the vulnerability in her expression, the fear that she'd just ruined something precious by being honest about her feelings. "Linda," Sam said slowly, reaching across the space between their chairs to take her hand. "I've been afraid to say the same thing to you. I've been falling in love with you too, but I didn't want you to think I was taking advantage of the situation or trying to replace what you had with Jake." The relief that flooded Linda's face was immediate and profound. "You're not replacing Jake," she said firmly. "What I felt for him was real and will always be part of me. But what I feel for you is different, built on who we are now and what we've created together. You're not Jake's replacement, Sam. You're Emma's father and you're the man I love." Sam stood up, pulling Linda to her feet and into his arms. The kiss that followed was gentle and tentative at first, then deeper as they both realized that the feelings they'd been hiding were mutual and welcome. Emma, oblivious to the significance of the moment, continued playing with her blocks, occasionally looking up at them with the pleased expression she wore when the adults in her life were happy. "So what happens now?" Linda asked when they broke apart, her forehead resting against Sam's. "Now we take it one day at a time," Sam said, echoing the advice Sarah had given him months ago. "We keep building this family, keep learning how to love each other, keep giving Emma the best life we can create together." The weeks that followed brought a new dimension to their relationship. The romantic feelings they'd acknowledged added depth to their daily interactions without disrupting the practical partnership they developed. They moved around each other with increasing intimacy, sharing small gestures of affection that felt natural and unforced. Emma seemed to sense the change in the household dynamics, becoming even more content and secure. She began saying her first words, "Mama" and "Dada," arriving within days of each other, each milestone celebrated with the enthusiasm of parents who understood how precious these moments were. Dr. Chun became a regular dinner guest, her friendship with Linda deepening into something that provided both women with the kind of support that came from shared experience and mutual understanding. Sarah had been dealing with her own grief and isolation since her husband's death, and the warmth of Sam's household seemed to provide her with a sense of belonging she'd been missing. "You know," Sarah said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Emma take her first tentative steps between Sam and Linda, "I used to think that healing from loss meant returning to who you were before. But watching you three together, I'm starting to think maybe it means becoming someone new, someone who can hold both the grief and the joy at the same time." Sam caught Emma as she toddled toward him, her face bright with pride at her accomplishment. "I think you're right," he said, lifting his daughter into his arms. "I'll always miss Maria, always carry that love with me. But I'm not the same person I was when she was alive, and I'm not the same person I was when she died. I'm someone who's learned that love doesn't end, it just changes form." Linda moved to stand beside them, her arms slipping around Sam's waist with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged there. "Emma's made us all better people," she said softly. "She's taught us that family isn't just about blood or marriage. Certificates. It's about choosing to love each other every day, even when it's complicated." As autumn arrived on the ranch, Sam found himself looking forward to the future with an optimism he'd thought was lost forever. Emma was walking confidently now, exploring every corner of the ranch with the fearless curiosity of a child who felt completely secure in her world. She followed Sam around the barn, her small hands reaching for everything that caught her attention, her voice chattering in the nonsense language that seemed to make perfect sense to her. The harvest season brought extra work and extra hands to the ranch, with neighbors helping to bring in the hay and prepare for winter. Emma was the star of every gathering, passed from person to person with the easy affection that's small children. Inspired in ranch communities, she seemed to understand that she was the center of attention, clapping her hands and laughing when people made faces at her, reaching for the cowboy hats that inevitably ended up on her head. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Linda observed, watching Emma charm Sheriff Bradley into giving her a ride on his shoulders. "Good," Sam said firmly. "Every child should be spoiled by their community. She learns soon enough that the world can be tough. For now, let her believe that everyone thinks she's wonderful." The first snow of the season arrived in early November, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland that delighted Emma beyond measure. She stood at the kitchen window, her small hands pressed against the glass, babbling excitedly at the white flakes falling from the sky. Sam bundled her up in the tiny snowsuit Linda had bought for her, and they spent an hour outside, Emma's eyes wide with wonder as she touched snow for the first time. "Cold," Emma announced, her new favorite word applying to everything that surprised her. "Very cold," Sam agreed, scooping up a handful of snow to show her. "But beautiful too." That night, as they sat by the fire with Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib upstairs, Sam and Linda talked about their plans for the future. The ranch was thriving under their joint management, Linda's business skills complementing Sam's knowledge of livestock and land management. They'd talked about expanding the operation, maybe adding some sheep or starting a small farmer's market operation. "I want to add on to the house," Sam said, his arm around Linda as they watched the fire crackle in the hearth. "A proper nursery. For Emma, maybe a playroom. And I want to build a workshop where I can teach her to work with wood when she's older." Linda smiled, settling more comfortably against his side. "I want to plant a garden next spring. A big one, with vegetables and flowers and maybe a small orchard. I want Emma to grow up knowing where food comes from, knowing how to take care of growing things." "Jake would love that," Sam said, and for the first time mentioning his friends. Name brought only warmth, no sadness. "He always said ranching was about taking care of the land so it could take care of you." "He'd love all of this," Linda agreed. "He'd love seeing Emma so happy and secure. He'd love knowing that the people he cared about most found a way to take care of each other." As winter deepened, the ranch settled into the quiet rhythm of the season. Emma continued to grow and change, her personality becoming more distinct every day. She was curious and determined, gentle with animals but fearless in her exploration of the world. She had Sam's steady temperament and Linda's bright smile, but her own unique way of approaching life that suggested she would be her own person as she grew older. The three of them had become a family in the truest sense, not because of blood or legal documents, but because of the daily choice to love and support each other. They'd learned to navigate the complexities of their unusual situation with grace and humor, creating traditions and memories that would bind them together for years to come. On Christmas morning, Sam woke to the sound of Emma's delighted laughter, coming from the living room. He found her sitting under the Christmas tree in her pajamas, Linda beside her helping her unwrap presents. The sight of them together, surrounded by the warm glow of Christmas lights and the comfortable chaos of a family morning, filled him with a contentment so profound it almost took his breath away. "Merry Christmas, Dad," Linda said, looking up at him with eyes bright with happiness. "Dada," Emma added, holding up a wooden horse Sam had carved for her, her face glowing with excitement. "Merry Christmas, my girls," Sam said, settling down beside them on the floor. "Merry Christmas to my beautiful family." As they spent the morning playing with Emma and enjoying the quiet peace of the holiday, Sam reflected on the year that had changed everything. 12 months ago, he'd been a man going through the motions of living, maintaining his existence, but not really participating in it. Today, he was a father, a partner, a man who had learned that love could grow in the most unexpected places and that family could be created through choice as much as circumstance. Emma fell asleep in his arms after lunch, exhausted from the excitement of Christmas morning. Sam held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against his chest. This tiny person had saved him in ways he was still discovering, had given him a purpose and a joy he'd thought was lost forever. "Thank you," he whispered to the sleeping child in his arms. "Thank you for choosing me to be your dad." Linda curled up beside him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, her hand gently stroking Emma's back. "No," she said softly. "Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for opening your heart and your home and your life to a scared woman and her baby. Thank you for showing us what family really means." As the afternoon light faded and the house settled into the peaceful quiet of Christmas evening, Sam felt a gratitude so deep it seemed to fill every corner of his being. The barn where he'd found Emma 11 months ago was still there, still serving its practical purpose of sheltering animals and storing feed. But it had also become something more, the place where his real life had begun, where a crying baby and a desperate mother had given him the chance to become the man he was meant to be. Outside, snow continued to fall on the ranch, covering the familiar landscape in pristine white. Inside, a family slept peacefully, secure in their love for each other and their commitment to the life they'd built together. And in the quiet of that snowy Christmas night, Sam Mitchell finally understood that sometimes the most precious gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, delivered not by grand gestures or careful planning, but by the simple act of opening your heart to love when it arrives at your door. 2 years had transformed the Mitchell Ranch from a place of quiet survival into a thriving homestead filled with the sounds of life and laughter. Emma, now approaching her 3rd birthday, raced through the house with the boundless energy of a toddler who knew every corner of her world belonged to her. Her dark hair had grown into loose curls that caught the morning light, and her eyes held the same intelligent curiosity that had captivated Sam from the very first day he'd found her in the barn. The changes to the ranch itself were striking. Sam had built the workshop he dreamed of, where Emma loved to sit on a small stool and help him craft furniture and toys with child-safe tools of her own. Linda's garden had flourished beyond their wildest expectations, producing enough vegetables to supply their table year-round and sell surplus at the farmer's market she'd established in town. The small orchard they'd planted was beginning to bear fruit, and Emma had appointed herself the official apple picker, though most of her harvest ended up in her mouth rather than the basket. The house bore the marks of a family that had grown organically rather than being planned. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and lower portions of several walls. Her toys were scattered in strategic locations throughout every room, and the furniture showed the comfortable wear that came from being lived in rather than preserved. The formal dining room had been converted into a playroom where Emma's dollhouse, built by Sam to precise scale, sat alongside her collection of carved animals and the toy barn that was an exact replica of the one where she'd been found. Sam stood at the kitchen window, watching Linda chase Emma through the vegetable garden, while both of them laughed at some private joke. The sight never failed to move him, this picture of domestic happiness that he'd never quite dared to imagine. For himself, Linda had changed too over the past 2 years, the haunted thinness replaced by the healthy glow of someone who slept well and ate regularly and felt secure in her place in the world. Her business managing the ranch's finances had expanded to include bookkeeping for several other local farms, giving her the independence and professional satisfaction she'd craved. The integration of their unusual family into the community had been seamless in ways that continued to surprise Sam. Emma was everyone's favorite at church gatherings, county fairs, and community events, passed from lap to lap with the easy affection that small-town people showed for children they'd watched grow from infancy. Sheriff Bradley had become Uncle Tom, bringing Emma small gifts and listening with exaggerated seriousness to her increasingly elaborate stories. Dr. Chun was Aunt Sarah, whose medical expertise had evolved to include scraped knees and childhood fears alongside her professional duties. Mrs. Helen Tucker had appointed herself Emma's unofficial grandmother, arriving every Sunday with cookies and staying for dinner with the natural assumption of someone who had earned her place at the family table. Her presence had been particularly meaningful during the difficult moments when Emma asked questions about her daddy in heaven, Helen's matter-of-fact wisdom helping navigate conversations about death and loss in ways that honored Jake's memory, while reassuring a small child about her security in the present. The legal aspects of their family had evolved as naturally as everything else. Sam and Linda had married the previous spring in a simple ceremony in their backyard, with Emma as flower girl and the entire community in attendance. Judge Matthews had performed the ceremony under the apple trees Sam and Linda had planted, and Emma had stolen the show by announcing loudly during the vows that she wanted cake now, please. The marriage felt like a formality celebrating what had already been true for months. They were a family in every sense that mattered. Emma's understanding of her family structure was remarkably sophisticated for a child her age. She knew that Daddy Jake was in heaven, that Daddy Sam was here with her every day, and that she was lucky to have 2 daddies who loved her very much. She talked to Jake's photograph every night before bed, telling him about her day with the casual confidence of a child who had never doubted that love transcended physical presence. Her relationship with Sam had the easy intimacy of a father and daughter who had never known a time when they didn't belong to each other. The ranch operation had expanded significantly under their joint management. Sam's expertise with cattle had combined with Linda's business acumen to create one of the most successful operations in the county. They'd added a small herd of sheep, partly because Emma had fallen in love with lambs at a neighboring farm, and partly because wool production fit well with Linda's growing interest in sustainable agriculture. The farmers' market had evolved into a cooperative venture with several other local producers, creating a weekly event that brought visitors from neighboring counties and boosted the entire region's economy. Emma had become the unofficial mascot of the farmers' market, greeting regular customers by name and helping Linda arrange vegetables with the serious concentration she brought to all important tasks. Her favorite job was collecting eggs from the chickens they'd added to the ranch menagerie, a task she performed with the careful precision of someone who understood the responsibility involved. The chickens seemed to recognize her authority, allowing her to reach into nesting boxes where they pecked irritably at adults who attempted the same liberty. The daily rhythms of ranch life had shaped Emma's understanding of responsibility and care in ways that made Sam proud. She helped feed animals morning and evening, her small hands competent at measuring grain and fresh water. She understood that animals depended on people for their care and took her role in that relationship seriously, though she wasn't above singing elaborate songs to the cattle or conducting complex conversations with the barn cats who had multiplied. Despite Sam's efforts at population control, Rex and Daisy had adapted to life with a toddler with the patient dignity of dogs, who understood their role in the family hierarchy. They followed Emma everywhere, serving as both playmates and protectors. Alert to any potential danger, but tolerant of the ear-pulling and tail-grabbing that came with being beloved by a small child. Emma had learned to read their moods and respect their boundaries, developing the kind of natural animal sense that came from growing up surrounded by creatures who communicated through body language and instinct. The workshop had become Sam's favorite place to spend time with Emma, teaching her to use tools safely while creating projects that ranged from practical to whimsical. Her latest obsession was learning to carve, her small fingers guided by Sam's steady hands as they shaped pieces of soft wood into recognizable forms. She had definite opinions about what she wanted to create, usually animals or people from her daily life, and the patience to work on projects over several days when the results mattered to her. Linda often joined them in the workshop after Emma's nap, the three of them working companionably on separate projects, while Emma chattered about her day or asked the endless questions that seemed to pour out of her mind faster than they could be answered. These afternoon sessions had become family time in the truest sense, unmarked by the formal structure of scheduled activities, but rich with the kind of casual intimacy that created lasting memories. The connection to Jake's memory remained strong and healthy rather than burdensome. Emma knew the stories of her biological father's courage, kindness, and love for her mother. She understood that he had been a soldier who died protecting people, that he would have loved her very much if he'd been able to meet her, and that Daddy Sam was carrying on the job of loving and protecting his family. The framed photographs throughout the house showed Jake as a young man full of life and possibility, and Emma spoke of him with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had never doubted his place in her family story. Sam had established traditions that honored Jake while building new memories for Emma. Every year on Jake's birthday, they visited his grave with flowers Emma had picked from Linda's garden and stories about what Emma had learned that year. On Veterans Day, they attended community ceremonies where Emma proudly carried a small flag and listened with unusual seriousness stories about brave soldiers like her daddy in heaven. These occasions were sad but not morbid acknowledgments of loss balanced by celebrations of the love that continued to shape their family. The relationship between Sam and Linda had deepened into the kind of partnership that looked effortless from the outside, but was built on daily choices to support, respect, and cherish each other. They had learned to navigate disagreements without drama, to share responsibilities without keeping score, and to maintain their individual identities while building a shared life. Their romantic connection had grown alongside their practical partnership, creating the kind of mature love that was based on genuine admiration and mutual support rather than infatuation or neediness. Emma had been the catalyst for their relationship, but she was no longer its center in the unhealthy way that sometimes happened when couples built their connection primarily around their children. Sam and Linda made time for each other as husband and wife, taking evening walks after Emma's bedtime, planning surprises for each other's birthdays, and maintaining the kind of affectionate friendship that provided a secure foundation for their daughter's understanding of what love looked like. Dr. Chun had become more than a family friend. She had evolved into what felt like an extended family member. Her own grief over her husband's death had softened into something manageable through her connection to the Mitchell household, and she had begun dating again, encouraged by the example of healing and second chances she saw in Sam and Linda's relationship. Emma adored her Aunt Sarah and looked forward to her visits with the anticipation usually reserved for special treats. The community's response to their family had exceeded Sam's most optimistic expectations. Rather than gossip or judgment about their unconventional beginning, neighbors had embraced them with the practical acceptance that characterized rural communities at their best. People understood that children needed stability and love, that good people sometimes found each other in unexpected ways, and that judging others' private arrangements was less important than supporting families that were working. The ranch itself had become a gathering place for community events, its spacious yard and welcoming atmosphere making it a natural choice for barbecues, birthday parties, and informal celebrations. Emma thrived in these social situations, her natural friendliness and charm making her popular with children and adults alike. She had inherited some of Linda's social skills and Jake's easy confidence, creating a personality that drew people to her without being demanding or attention-seeking. As Emma's third birthday approached, Sam found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The terrified man who had found a crying baby in his barn 3 years ago bore little resemblance to the confident father and husband he had become. The transformation hadn't been dramatic or sudden, but rather a gradual rebuilding of himself around the framework of love and responsibility that Emma had provided. The birthday party planning had become a family project, with Emma contributing ideas that ranged from practical to fantastical. She wanted a cake shaped like a barn, entertainment that included pony rides, and invitations for everyone she had ever met, including the mailman and the lady at the grocery store who always gave her stickers. Linda translated these wishes into a manageable celebration that would fulfill Emma's vision while remaining within the bounds of sanity and budget. The guest list had grown to include most of the community, a testament to how completely the Mitchell family had integrated into local life. Sheriff Bradley would bring his patrol car for the children to explore. Dr. Chun was organizing a small petting zoo with help from neighboring farms, and Mrs. Tucker was coordinating a potluck that would ensure no one went hungry. The celebration would take place in the same barn where Emma had been found, transformed for the occasion, but retaining its significance as the place where their family story had begun. Emma's excitement about her birthday was infectious. Her chatter about the upcoming party filling the house with anticipation and joy. She had strong opinions about every detail, from the color of balloons to the games they would play, approaching the planning with the seriousness of someone organizing a major diplomatic event. Her enthusiasm reminded Sam daily of how much she had grown and changed, how the tiny infant who had been left in his care had become this vibrant, confident child with her own personality and preferences. The night before the party, Sam and Linda sat on the porch after Emma had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the excitement of anticipation. The familiar ritual of evening conversation had evolved over the years, but remained one of their most treasured traditions, a time to reconnect after busy days and share thoughts that didn't always find space during the daylight hours filled with work and childcare. Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you hadn't found Emma that morning? Linda asked, her hand resting comfortably in Sam's as they watched fireflies begin their nightly dance across the pasture. Sam considered the question, trying to imagine the alternate timeline where he had chosen to sleep in that morning, where someone else had discovered Emma, where their paths had never crossed in the desperate circumstances that had brought them together. I think about it sometimes, he admitted, but I can't really picture it anymore. This life, this family, it feels like the only life I was ever meant to live. Linda squeezed his hand, a gesture that conveyed understanding and agreement without need for words. I used to think that losing Jake was the end of my story, she said quietly. That everything good in my life was behind me and I was just going through the motions for Emma's sake. I never imagined that there could be another chapter, let alone one this beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch and watching Emma's nightlight glow softly in her upstairs bedroom window. The peace of the moment felt profound and complete, the kind of contentment that came not from the absence of problems, but from the presence of love sufficient to handle whatever challenges might arise. The birthday party the next day exceeded even Emma's elaborate expectations. The barn had been transformed with balloons and streamers. Long tables groaned under the weight of community potluck contributions, and children ran everywhere with the joyous chaos that marked successful celebrations. Emma moved through the crowd like a small queen holding court, greeting guests with hugs and thank yous, opening presents with appropriate enthusiasm, and ensuring that everyone felt welcome in her kingdom. The cake, shaped like a perfect replica of the barn, drew gasps of admiration from children and adults alike. Emma's delight when she saw it was so pure and complete that several adults found themselves wiping away tears at the sight of her joy. When it came time to blow out the candles, she stood on a chair between Sam and Linda, her small face serious with concentration as she made her wish. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" Linda asked after the candles had been successfully extinguished to enthusiastic applause. Emma's answer, delivered with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who had never doubted the security of her world, brought the entire gathered community to silence. "I wish that we could all be together like this forever and ever, and that Daddy Jake could see how happy we are." The moment crystallized everything Sam had learned about love, loss, and the unexpected ways that families could be formed. Looking around at the faces of friends and neighbors who had embraced his unusual family, at Linda whose eyes were bright with tears of happiness, at Emma who had somehow managed to honor her past while celebrating her present, Sam felt a gratitude so profound it seemed to encompass not just this moment, but every moment that had led to it. As the afternoon wore on and guests began to drift away with promises to see each other soon, Sam found himself standing in the doorway of the barn where it had all begun. The space looked different, decorated for celebration rather than serving. Its utilitarian purpose, but the essential character remained unchanged. This was still the place where he had found Emma, where his real life had begun, where a desperate mother's plea had transformed 3 broken people into a family. Emma, exhausted from the excitement, but too wound up to nap, sat on Sam's shoulders. As they watched the last guests depart, her small hands rested on his head with the unconscious trust of someone who had never doubted her security, her voice chattering about the best parts of her party while Linda cleaned up with help from the few friends who always stayed to help restore order after community events. "Daddy Sam," Emma said suddenly, her voice taking on the serious tone she used for important conversations, "do you think Daddy Jake knows about my birthday party?" Sam paused, considering how to answer this question that went to the heart of everything they had built together. "I think Daddy Jake knows about everything good that happens in our family," he said finally. "I think he's happy that you're loved and safe and growing up strong and smart and kind." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the gravity she brought to all discussions about her father in heaven. "I think he likes that you take care of me and Mama," she said eventually. "I think he's glad we're all together." The simple wisdom of her words hit Sam with unexpected force. This child, who had never known a world where she wasn't completely loved and wanted, had somehow understood the essential truth of their situation, that love didn't end with death, that families could be formed in unexpected ways, and that gratitude and joy could coexist with grief and loss. As evening fell over the ranch and the 3 of them settled into their familiar routine of dinner, bath time, and bedtime stories, Sam reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The man who had found a crying baby in his barn 3 years ago had been broken in ways he was only beginning to understand, living but not truly alive, maintaining his existence but not participating in it. Tonight, as he read Emma her favorite story about a little girl who lived on a farm with animals who could talk, as Linda sat in the rocking chair Jake had built listening with the smile of someone completely content with her place in the world, Sam felt the profound satisfaction of a life lived with purpose and meaning. He had learned that love was not a finite resource, but something that grew larger when shared, that families could be created through choice and commitment as much as through biology, and that sometimes the most profound blessings came disguised as crises. Emma fell asleep holding the wooden horse Sam had carved for her first Christmas, her other hand clutching the small photograph of Jake that lived on her knitstand. Watching her peaceful face in the soft glow of her nightlight, Sam made a silent, promised to the friend he had lost and the daughter he had gained. He would continue to love them both with everything he had. To honor Jake's memory by raising Emma with the values they had both believed in, and to never take for granted the extraordinary gift of this ordinary life they had built together. The ranch settled into quiet as the three of them slept peacefully. Under the Montana sky, a family complete in ways that none of them could have imagined when their story began. In the barn where it had all started, the animals rested in their stalls, safe and cared for by people who understood that love was measured not in grand gestures, but in the daily choice to show up, to care, and to remain faithful to the commitments that mattered most. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, bearing witness to the countless small miracles that transformed ordinary lives into something extraordinary. And in the morning, they would wake to begin another day of the beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they had chosen to build together, one moment of love at a time. 5 years later, Emma Mitchell stood at the edge of the pasture holding her baby brother's tiny hand, pointing excitedly at the horses grazing in the distance. At 8 years old, she had grown into a confident, spirited child whose laughter could be heard across the ranch from dawn until dusk. Her dark curls caught the morning sunlight as she bent down to whisper something to 3-year-old David, whose bright blue eyes and stubborn chin marked him unmistakably as Sam's biological son. The addition of David to their family 18 months ago had completed something none of them had realized was missing. Linda's pregnancy had been a surprise that transformed into the deepest joy, proof that life could continue to offer unexpected gifts even when happiness already felt complete. Sam had been terrified and elated in equal measure, his protective instincts expanding to encompass this new life, while marveling at how differently he approached fatherhood the second time around. Emma had embraced her role as big sister with the fierce dedication she brought to everything she cared about. She appointed herself David's protector, translator, and teacher, explaining the world to him with the patient authority of someone who had never doubted her own place in it. Her love for her little brother was uncomplicated and absolute, untainted by jealousy or resentment, because she had never questioned her parents' love or her security in their affections. The ranch had evolved into something that exceeded even their most ambitious dreams. What had begun as a simple cattle operation had grown into a diversified agricultural enterprise that included sheep, chickens, a thriving vegetable operation, and a small herd of dairy goats that Emma considered her personal responsibility. The farmers' market had expanded into a year-round business that attracted visitors from across the state, and Linda's reputation as a farm-to-table entrepreneur had earned recognition in agricultural journals and sustainable farming publications. Sam's workshop had become a destination for people seeking handcrafted furniture and toys, his reputation for quality and artistry spreading through word of mouth and the small display cases he maintained at local businesses. Emma spent countless hours in the workshop, her skills with tools advancing steadily under Sam's patient guidance. Her latest project was a dollhouse for her best friend's birthday, complete with miniature furniture she had designed and crafted. Herself, the house itself bore witness to the fullness of their lives. David's toys were scattered throughout the rooms alongside Emma's books and art supplies. Family photographs covered every available surface, and the kitchen table served as command center for homework, business planning, and the elaborate craft projects that seemed to multiply whenever Emma had an idea. The formal spaces Maria had created had given way to the comfortable chaos of a home where children were encouraged to explore, create, and claim ownership of their environment. Dr. Chun had married Sheriff Bradley the previous summer in a ceremony that took place in Sam and Linda's backyard, with Emma serving as flower girl and David toddling down the aisle as ring bearer with the concentrated seriousness of someone performing an important job. The couple had moved into a house just outside town, close enough for frequent visits, but far enough to maintain their independence. Sarah's transition from family friend to aunt by marriage had felt natural and right, adding another layer of security to the children's expanding world. Mrs. Tucker, now in her 80s but still formidable, had appointed herself the children's honorary grandmother, with the assumption of someone who had earned the right through years of Sunday dinners and emergency babysitting. She had taught Emma to knit and was working on teaching David to play checkers, though his attention span for strategy games remained limited. Her presence in their lives provided a connection to the community's history and values that grounded the children in something larger than their immediate family. The connection to Jake's memory had evolved as Emma grew older and more capable of understanding complex emotions. She still talked to his photograph every night, but the conversations had become more sophisticated, sharing school achievements, friendship dramas, and the small triumphs and disappointments of childhood. She understood that she had two fathers who loved her, one who watched over her from heaven and one who was present for bedtime stories, scraped knees, and the countless small moments that comprised daily life. David's presence had added a new dimension to these conversations about family structure. He had been too young during his early months to understand the questions he was asking, but as his vocabulary expanded, he began wondering why Emma talked to the man in the photograph and why she had a different daddy than he did. Emma had taken on the role of family historian, explaining to David about Daddy, Jake's love for all of them, and how families could have different shapes while containing the same amount of love. The annual pilgrimage to Jake's grave had become a family tradition that included David from his earliest months. They brought flowers from Linda's garden, stories about the children's accomplishments, and updates about the ranch and community. Emma always brought something she had made in Sam's workshop, leaving small wooden animals or carved figures as gifts for the father she had never met but felt connected to through story and love. Sam's relationship with farming had deepened beyond mere economic necessity into something approaching spiritual practice. He had learned to read the weather patterns, to understand the subtle communications of animals in his care, and to find satisfaction in the rhythm of seasons and the cycles of growth and harvest. The land responded to his attention with increasing productivity, but more importantly, it had become a source of peace and purpose that sustained him through the challenges and celebrations of family life. Linda's transformation from desperate young widow to confident businesswoman and mother had been remarkable to witness. Her natural intelligence and determination had found outlets in multiple directions, managing the ranch's finances, developing new markets for their products, and creating systems that allowed them to balance profit with sustainability. She had become a sought-after speaker at agricultural conferences, sharing their story as an example of how family farms could thrive through diversification and community connections. The children's education had become a family project that extended far beyond traditional schooling. Emma attended the local elementary school, where she excelled academically while maintaining the kind of friendships that came naturally to someone raised to value kindness and inclusion. But her real education took place on the ranch, where she learned responsibility through caring for animals, problem solving through helping with mechanical repairs, and business principles through observing and occasionally helping with the farmer's market. David's education was still primarily experiential, consisting of following Emma around the ranch while she explained everything she encountered. His vocabulary was advanced for his age, partly because he was surrounded by adults who talked to him as if he could understand complex concepts, and partly because Emma had appointed herself his private tutor in subjects ranging from animal behavior to basic mechanics. The workshop had become a gathering place for neighborhood children, particularly during summer months when parents were working and children needed constructive activities. Sam found himself teaching woodworking skills to a rotating group of youngsters, creating projects that challenged their abilities while building confidence and practical skills. Emma served as his assistant instructor, her patience with younger children and natural teaching ability making her invaluable in managing the controlled chaos of multiple children working with tools. The seasonal rhythms of ranch life provided structure and meaning that urban childhoods often lacked. Spring brought the excitement of new calves and lambs, planting gardens, and preparing equipment for the growing season. Summer meant long days helping with hay harvests, swimming in the creek that bordered their property, and the weekly farmers' markets that had become social events as much as business ventures. Fall brought the satisfaction of harvest, the preparation for winter, and the community celebrations that marked the end of the growing season. Emma had become an expert at preserving vegetables, helping Linda with canning projects that would sustain them through the winter months. David's contributions to these efforts were more enthusiastic than practical, but his presence made even mundane tasks feel celebratory. Winter offered different pleasures, time for indoor projects, opportunities to focus on schoolwork without the distractions of outdoor activities, and the cozy intimacy of evenings spent around the fireplace with books, games, and conversation. The forced slowing of pace that winter brought had become precious family time, allowing for deeper connections and the kind of unhurried conversations that created lasting memories. Emma's artistic abilities had flourished under the encouragement of parents who valued creativity alongside practical skills. Her drawings covered the refrigerator and walls of her bedroom, progressing from simple representations to increasingly sophisticated attempts to capture the world around her. She had inherited Linda's eye for color and Sam's attention to detail, creating artwork that captured the essence of ranch life with surprising skill for someone her age. David showed early signs of mechanical aptitude, drawn to anything with moving parts and fascinated by the process of taking things apart to understand how they worked. Sam had learned to child-proof his workshop while still allowing David access to age-appropriate tools and projects. The boy's concentration when working on puzzles or simple building projects suggested an analytical mind that would serve him well regardless of his eventual career choices. The community's response to their growing family had been overwhelmingly positive. Emma and David were claimed by the entire town as honorary grandchildren, nieces and nephews, creating an extended support network that provided security and enrichment beyond what any nuclear family could offer alone. The children understood that they belonged not just to their immediate family, but to a larger community that had invested in their well-being and success. The farmers' market had become a weekly celebration that brought together producers and consumers in relationships that went far beyond simple commercial transactions. Emma and David were fixtures at the market, helping customers, playing with other children, and learning the social skills that came from interacting with people of all ages and backgrounds. They were growing up with an understanding of where food came from and how communities could support local agriculture that would shape their values throughout their lives. As Emma's 8th birthday approached, Sam found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of abundance and joy. The terrified man who had found a crying baby in his barn 8 years ago seemed like a different person, someone he remembered fondly but could barely recognize in his current identity as confident father, successful rancher, and community leader. The birthday celebration had become an annual highlight for the entire community, with Emma's parties serving as unofficial reunions for friends and neighbors who looked forward to the gathering as much as the birthday girl did. This year's theme reflected her current obsession with horses, and Sam had spent weeks crafting a detailed wooden stable complete with movable stalls and miniature horses that Emma could use with her collection of toy animals. Linda's pregnancy with David had been a turning point in their understanding of family and love. The fear that a biological child might somehow diminish Emma's place in their hearts had proven completely unfounded. Instead, David's arrival had demonstrated that love multiplied rather than divided, that the capacity for caring expanded to accommodate whoever needed it. The night before Emma's birthday party, the family gathered on the porch for their traditional evening conversation. David had fallen asleep in Sam's lap, exhausted from a day of helping with party preparations, while Emma sat beside Linda describing her excitement about the upcoming celebration. The familiar ritual had evolved to accommodate their growing family but retained its essential character as a time for connection and reflection. "Do you remember," Linda asked, "watching fireflies begin their dance across the pasture, when we used to wonder what Emma's future would look like? When we worried about whether we were making the right choices for her?" Sam shifted David to a more comfortable position, marveling at how natural it felt to hold a sleeping child. "I remember being terrified that I would somehow fail her, that I wouldn't know how to be a good father because I'd never had the chance to practice." Emma looked up from the book she was reading by porch light. "You're the best daddy ever," she said with the matter-of-fact certainty that characterized all her pronouncements. "You and Daddy Jake both. Unlucky I got two daddies who loved me so much." The simple statement encapsulated everything they had learned about love, loss, and the unexpected ways that families could be formed. Emma's security in her identity and her place in their family had never wavered, built on the foundation of consistent love and honest communication about her origins and the people who had shaped her life. As they prepared for bed, following the routines that had become sacred through repetition, Sam felt the deep satisfaction that came from a life lived with purpose and meaning. The ranch was thriving, the children were healthy and happy, and the community that had embraced them continued to provide support and friendship that enriched every aspect of their lives. The birthday party the next day exceeded even Emma's elaborate expectations, with friends arriving from across the county to celebrate in the barn that had become legendary as the site where their family story began. The wooden stable Sam had created drew gasps of admiration from children and adults alike, but Emma's reaction was the only one that mattered. Her face lit up with pure joy when she saw it, and her immediate hug conveyed gratitude and love more eloquently than words ever could. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart with promises to see each other soon, Emma stood in the doorway of the barn holding David's hand while he rubbed sleepy eyes with his free fist. The sight of his children silhouetted against the late afternoon light streaming through the barn doors brought back vivid memories of that first morning when he had found Emma alone and crying in the same space. The transformation was complete and profound. Where once there had been abandonment and desperation, now there was celebration and joy. Where once there had been fear and uncertainty, now there was confidence and security. The barn that had witnessed the beginning of their story continued to serve as the gathering place for the community that had embraced them, but its meaning had evolved from a place of crisis to a symbol of hope and renewal. That night, as Sam tucked Emma into bed and listened to her recount the best parts of her birthday celebration, he was struck by how completely natural their life together had become. The unusual circumstances of their beginning no longer seemed remarkable or fragile. They were simply the origin story of a family that had grown into something beautiful and strong. Emma's sleepy voice interrupted his thoughts. "Daddy Sam, do you think Daddy Jake knows how happy we all are? Do you think he's glad about David and the ranch and everything good that happened?" Sam smoothed the hair back from her forehead, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the past 8 years. "I think Daddy Jake knows about every good thing that happens in our family," he said softly. "I think he's proud of the young lady you're becoming and excited about all the adventures still waiting for you." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that she was loved by everyone who mattered, living and departed. As Sam turned off her light and checked on David sleeping peacefully in the next room, he felt the profound gratitude that had become the foundation of his daily experience. The ranch settled into quiet around them, animals safe in their stalls and pastures, the house filled with the peaceful breathing of his sleeping family. Outside, the Montana sky stretched endlessly overhead, the same sky that had witnessed a desperate young mother leaving her baby in a stranger's barn 8 years ago. now bearing witness to the extraordinary life that had grown from that moment of crisis and faith. In the morning, they would wake to another day of the beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they had chosen to build together. There would be animals to feed, children to nurture, work to accomplish, and love to share. It was an ordinary life made extraordinary by the simple decision to remain open to whatever gifts the world might offer, even when they arrived wrapped in fear and uncertainty. The story that had begun with a crying baby and a broken man had become something neither of them could have imagined, a testament to the healing power of love, the strength that came from chosen family, and the remarkable resilience of the human heart when given the chance to hope again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.